Please be seated. My name is Robin Miller, and I currently serve as Temple President of Temple Emanu-El. It's an honor and privilege today to have Jonathan Greenblatt here as our scholar in resident. Jonathan is the CEO of ADL and its 6th national director. Since becoming CEO in July 2015, he has modernized ADL while refocusing it on the mission it has had since its founding in 1913, to fight the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. Under Jonathan, ADL has modernized its operations, innovated its approaches to counter anti-Semitism from all sides, and enhanced its efforts to combat extremism in all forms. During his tenure, ADL rebooted its Center on Extremism, launched Never Is Now, created the Center for Technology and Society in Silicon Valley to fight the rising tide of online hate and harassment, partnered with the Aspen Institute to launch the Civil Society Fellowship, developed the Sports Leadership Council to engage athletes, teams, and leagues to confront bigotry and discrimination more effectively, and executed Stop Hate for Profit, the successful campaign that organized businesses, celebrities, nonprofits, and policymakers to fight the rampant racism, anti-Semitism, and extremism on Facebook. In 2022, he released It Could Happen Here, a book that sounds an alarm, warning that hate, systemic violence is gathering momentum in the United States, and that violence on a more catastrophic scale could be just around the corner. Jonathan serves on numerous corporate and nonprofit boards and has been recognized on multiple occasions for his leadership at ADL. Before ADL, he served in the White House as Special Assistant to President Obama and Director of the Office of Social Innovation. In 2002, he co-founded Ethos Brands, a premium bottled water that helps children around the world access clean water. In 2009, Jonathan founded All for Good. He served as CEO of Good Worldwide, Realtor.com, joining the company as a product manager and eventually heading up its consumer products division. He served as an adjunct faculty member at the Anderson School of Management at UCLA and a senior fellow at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. He's a Harry Crown Fellow of the Aspen Institute and a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Please welcome Jonathan Greenblatt.
I want to speak on behalf of myself, and I want to speak on behalf of everyone who's gathered here, and I want to speak on behalf of millions of Jews who are not gathered here, to tell you how appreciative, how honored, and how thankful we are to have a leader like you in front of the pack, dealing with the challenges and issues that we're dealing with. It gives us hope, it gives us resolve, and it tremendous gratitude and appreciation. I imagine you've slept about 10, here we go. I imagine you've slept about 10 hours in the last 5 weeks. And at times it can be thankless, but I want you to know how appreciative each and every one of us, and when I say us, it's not just the synagogue, it's our community and communities across the country are for you and for your leadership. So thank you. I want to give a quick shout out to Brandy Rubin, who was able to make this happen so quickly, and for her amazing leadership. You have a great team at ADL, also Ariel Behrman, who is part of our community as well. And we have a small present for you from our congregation. This is a kippah made in Israel that is a replica of our dome. Bravo. And we hope that you wear it and know that this might be your first visit to Temple Emanu-El, but please God, it's not your last, and that you should wear it in good health always. I'm also incredibly pleased, happy, that you brought your bride with you, Marjan. Luckily, you're local today. You get to sleep at home, and it is an honor to finally meet you. We've heard so many amazing things about you and your leadership, and I'm going to give this to Jonathan to give you. This is a silk scarf of our identical dome, just the same, and we hope that you will come back and join us in prayer and in worship and in times of celebration as well. It is an honor to host you both this Shabbat. Thank you. Let me get to the heart of the matter, and let me start by saying...
Can I do something first?
Yeah, of course.
Can I just acknowledge Austin? You are awesome.
Agreed.
Like, you're dominating on the courts. You dominated this morning. My wife and I just sat there and heard your story and were just absolutely blown away. And I think what you said about Kobe is exactly right. Hard work beats talent every single time. And your resilience and your strength, wow. So oftentimes I get asked what gives me hope. Because, life's challenging, and the issues are not easy, and the times are tough, and it will probably get tougher. You give me hope. This morning gives me hope. And what a gift for me. What a gift for me to have the chance to be here to hear you. And like mom and dad, Yasher Koach, really, you've done something right. This kid is amazing and bound for greatness. So thank you for giving me this privilege.
Thank you. It's all true. I'm going to start off in a pastoral way. I don't usually start off this way, Jonathan, but there used to be a commercial about the hair club for men. It's not a dig. It's not a dig. It's not a dig. Where he used to say, I'm not only the president, I'm also a client. You are doing this work on behalf of the Jewish people, but you're also a proud, involved, advocating Jew. And beyond leading the ADL, you have this other world where you're also, targeted as a Jew, right? This has led challenges to you and your family. And my first question to you is, after these 5 weeks and this, unpredictable tsunami, how are you? How are you holding up? And how is this affecting you as the Jew first?
Well, I guess there are a few things. So number one, I am a Jew. Sometimes I get asked, am I a Jewish American or am I American Jew? It's not a hard question for me. I'm an American Jew. My wife is an Iranian Jew. My grandfather was a German Jew. I'm a Jew. That is and always has been, this most essential element of my identity. And look, I'm in a job I never would have expected to be in, but I'm in a job that gives me tremendous purpose and clarity. I can tell you something, I do not wake up wondering what my job description is. My job description is protect the Jewish people. That's it. That's my job. Some people might not agree with how I do it. Some people might think they could do it better. That's fine. But I know why I'm here. And so to the question of how am I doing, maybe I'll best answer that by telling a story.
Please.
So when I was in 11th grade, I had to do a project for some high school class, a social studies class. I interviewed someone in your family. I interviewed my grandfather. He was from Germany, as I just sort of mentioned. And he was a Holocaust survivor who never talked about it. Never. And this is, before the Shoah Foundation and before Schindler's List. There was no discussion about any of these things in my house. It was just too hard, just too difficult. But he was willing to do this interview with me, and we taped it, and we used tape recorders. You don't know what that is, Austin, but it's an interesting device. And I asked him, among other questions, I said, did you ever imagine when you were a young man growing up in Germany that your grandchildren, meaning me, my brother, my cousins, did you ever imagine that your grandchildren would be American? And my grandfather, who had a very thick German accent, he came here in his 20s, he basically said, no, I never thought about it when I was a young man, but if I did, I'm sure I would have thought my grandchildren would be in Germany, because where else would they be? Where else would they be? I mean, and Germany, as he told me, was a great country. He called it the greatest country in the world, until one day Germany regarded him and his family and all the Jews as enemies of the people, destroyed everything they ever loved, annihilated all of them, and forced him to come here as a refugee. Like my grandfather never would have guessed, as he told me, that he'd have American grandchildren. Flash forward, Rabbi, maybe 15 years. I'm in my in-laws' apartment in Los Angeles with my wife and her father. Now, my wife and her sister and her parents, they came from Iran. They came from Iran. And they lived there as long as they know. We did one of those 23andMe's, 99.9% Iranian. They say they're descended from the Jews that Cyrus the Great welcomed after the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem. Wow. So, my oldest son, whose name is Ilan, named after Ilan Ramon, he was crawling around. He wasn't even walking yet, so he wasn't talking. And I said to my father-in-law, Mansour Khan, that's his name, Mansour, can you believe you have this American grandson? Isn't that crazy? Now, my father-in-law, Marjan, you were there, he basically said, no. And he has a very thick Persian accent, which I also won't try to do. But he basically said, never could imagine. He said, I always thought if I had grandchildren, they'd be in Iran. And then he said, because where else would they be? So my Iranian father-in-law, a Jew, literally, it hit me like a bolt of lightning, used the same phrase that my German grandfather, a Jew, had used. Where else would they be? So to the question of how am I doing, I want my grandchildren, God willing, to be born in this country. I want my grandchildren, God willing, if they want to be as American as I am sitting here today. That's why I took this job, and that's what gives me focus every single day, because I got news for all of you who are sitting here, every single one of you, even for Austin. We can't take for granted that our grandchildren will be born here unless we fight for what we have. We don't get to think that it's just a foregone conclusion. It wasn't for my grandfather, it wasn't for my father-in-law, and it isn't for me. So the question of how I'm doing, I am as laser-like focused because I want my grandchildren and I want your grandchildren to be born right here in America, because that's where we belong.
So that's a perfect segue for my next question. Let's rewind to a few minutes before COVID. There's a giant march over the Brooklyn Bridge to stop hate. Anti-Semitism is on this dramatic rise. This is before, obviously, what happened on October 7th. And I categorize it as alt-Neue, to play a little bit on Herzl's. Herzl wrote a book called A New Old Land. It means we're going to someplace totally new, but it has familiarity to us. That's what anti-Semitism feels like. There's a lot of familiarity to what's happening on the street, to the news cycles, but there's also some very significant differences. You know, in Germany, it was the leader of the Reich that was enacting these laws. Here in America, under both parties of presidents, we have people protecting us. Same thing with the Congress. Can you talk a little bit about what were the factors that's been leading anti-Semitism, to increase significantly, and what are some of those different things that doesn't make this moment like 1935 Berlin?
So I think if we try to understand why is anti-Semitism rising, and by the way, it is definitely on the rise. Not just the stories you hear from kids in college, all the data tells us that it is at historic levels. The anti-Semitic incidents, ADL tracks incidents. We don't publish reports, we don't publish complaints, we publish incidents that we have investigated and verified. Last year was the highest number we have ever seen. The prior high point was 2021. The prior record was 2019. The numbers before October 7th were more than 500% greater than a decade earlier. So why is it changing? Number one, anti-Semitism has been normalized in our society today. Again, I don't really care how you vote. I care what you value. That's how I think. Not red or blue, I think Jew. And that's important because we've seen people on both sides of the spectrum normalize things like anti-Zionism, which is anti-Semitism. Normalize things like the Great Replacement theory, which is anti-Semitism. Normalize attacks on Sheldon Adelson. Normalize attacks on George Soros. Normalize demonizing Jewish individuals, the Jewish state, in ways that are Jewish conspiracies, in ways that are really frightening. So anti-Semitism has been normalized today. So that's number one. I think number two, in an environment where our leadership, and God bless Joe Biden, God bless the leaders God bless Hakeem Jeffries, God bless Richie Torres, God bless Mike Johnson and Mitch McConnell, all of them, because they're all got the message, for sure. And yet, when our university presidents are so weak and feckless, when the presidents of our news networks are so pathetic, when the presidents of your local school board have lost the plot, extremists feel emboldened. And so we have people running for school boards. We have people teaching our kids. We have people doing things with impunity they never would have done before. So number one, I think anti-Semitism has been normalized. Number two, extremists are penetrating the conversation in public spaces in ways we haven't seen. And then thirdly, social media. It is the amplifier. It is the exacerbator. Social media is a super spreader. We're all in trouble if our kids are getting their news from TikTok. And they are. So you think New York Times is a problem? Spend 10 minutes on TikTok, and let me tell you, it will change your point of view. Look at Twitter/X. That's literally like the town square. So social media. Now, on top of all of these issues, on top of normalizing anti-Semitism, extremists being emboldened, and social media's, poisonous role, then you have this increasing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And then you have sort of spasms like COVID. And let me tell you something. When times go bad, in Germany, in Iran, they blame the Jews. And we're seeing this scapegoating right now show up again, and that's very worrisome to me.
So I'm going to jump out of order from what we had talked about, and let's jump right into social media if we can for a minute. I just got home from Israel yesterday. While I was there,
how was it?
It was an emotional roller coaster of incredible highs and painful lows. That said, it happened to rain for about an hour while we were there, and this beautiful rainbow, stunning, clear for everyone, came out over Tel Aviv. And I happened to take a picture of it, and I put it on our synagogue Facebook page. I've been reluctant in the last few weeks to put things on the synagogue Facebook page, just on my Facebook page. And within hours, it wasn't boosted, wasn't promoted. It was attacked by, without exaggeration, thousands of anti-Israel, anti-Jewish haters. It was flooded. Some of them had to be bots, and I was literally spending hours going through and deleting each one of them and cleaning them out. What do we do? Because there seems to have been ripe kindling here that Hamas lit the match for. What do we do to address this super spreader of social media, especially because I liken it to a car. You could take a car to take people to the hospital. You can buy food for the hungry with the car. You can take your kids to school, but you can also ram people with it and use it as a weapon. How do we make sure that what's happening on social media stays better regulated and doesn't become that weapon, especially since so many impressionable minds are soaking onto it?
So it is really a challenge. And the way that these companies are set up, from Meta to X, the public ones like Meta and Google, for those of you who know, they have different sort of stock structures. So their biggest shareholders, who control the boards, are immune, or they're not really susceptible to shareholder pressure. And then you have private companies like TikTok or X, where again, you have to ply the leadership. Now, the good news is that I can tell you, in the last week, I've talked to the CEO of Twitter and or X and the CEO of TikTok. And you know, yesterday you saw Elon Musk, 36 hours ago, he retweeted a disgusting thing online where someone blamed all the Jews, and he said, this is the exact truth. And then he clarified, well, not all the Jews, just the ADL. Oh. And then he clarified again, and he said, well, not just the ADL, a lot of Jews. Look, so I criticized him, and this is my job. This is my role. And then yesterday, after some conversations, he went online, and I guess I'm breaking news here. I had a long conversation with him yesterday, a long conversation with him. And then an hour later, he went online and said, from the river to the sea, decolonization, these are calls for genocide, and we're going to take them down. Bravo.
Bravo to you.
Well,
I assure you, Elon Musk didn't get there by himself. Bravo to you.
I'm sure I'll hear it from a lot of other people too, but I had a very productive conversation. And then, and what I would say is that he's a work in progress. So I've got a lot of people, and I tweeted right before Shabbat, and then I turn off my phone. I'm not looking at my phone. So I don't know what people are saying. I'm sure I'm getting lots of hate. But we have got to try to strike a détente with people like Elon Musk and with Shou Chu, the CEO of TikTok, and help them understand our point of view. And when they get it wrong, like, I don't believe in cancel culture. Here's something I'll say that some people might not like. I don't believe in cancel culture. I believe in counsel culture. Even hate speech, guys, even speech we detest, that's the price of living in a democracy. Hate speech is the price of free speech. So when Elon Musk gets it wrong, I want to try to pull him in and help him get it right, not push him away. Now, I know it can be very cathartic just to slam him, and I did criticize, but I think as Jews, as 2% of the population, we can't afford to make enemies. We've got to try to make friends wherever we can. And even though I think what he said was revolting on Thursday, God bless what he said on Friday. Even though there are things that I think Joe Biden is doing totally right, I'll criticize him when he gets it wrong. Even though there were things I thought that Donald Trump did that were totally wrong, I'll praise him when he gets it right. My job here, our job as Jews, is to do the best that we can with what we've got. So number one, I'll try moral suasion where I can. Moral suasion. Number two, there are also market forces. I think the other thing that's happening with Elon is yesterday, Disney, who else? Let me think. Apple, Disney, Apple, and IBM, and several other advertisers dropped him. More will come. More will drop him, believe me. So market pressures are not a bad thing either. So you got moral suasion, then you have market pressure, and we did this successfully with Facebook. We launched a campaign against Facebook in 2020, and we squeezed them. And then guess what? Suddenly, they said, okay, we're going to take down the white supremacist posts. Suddenly, they started classifying Holocaust denialism as hate speech. Can you believe they didn't do that before? Now, again, Meta's got a long way to go, but market pressure worked there. But finally, Rabbi, moral suasion is good. Market pressure's even better. But the best thing of all would be government regulation. Now look, I am a capitalist through and through. And I like self-regulation generally. But this product, social media, is like cigarettes. It should have a warning label on it. And yet there's an exemption in the law that doesn't hold these companies liable when they publish libel. That has got to change. I think the day will come when we'll look at our phones like, again, drugs. Like, imagine giving your kid a thing of what do they call it, a carton?
Yeah, a packet.
A pack of cigarettes before you go to school every day. That's what we're doing when we give our kids phones. The day will come when it will be regulated with warning labels on it, God willing. But until then, we've got to push the government to get there. We've got to push them to get there. And again, everybody doesn't like the government. The government doesn't always get it right. But on this, the cost of getting it wrong is our lives.
Well, I think you're 100% right. If NBC, ABC, CNN, all of Fox, if they all have to be regulated in the stuff that they share, if more people are getting their news from social media,
They
it should also.
That's right. Like, if you publish, if NBC libels you,
You can sue them.
you could sue them. If the New York Times slanders you, you can sue them. If the billboard company defames you, you can sue them. If Facebook defames you, nothing. If TikTok slanders you, nothing. If X libels you, nothing. Now, it's crazy that the most profitable companies in the country, the most innovative companies on the planet, don't play by the same rules. That's all we need.
So let me ask you a question that dovetails into that. And one of the things that's hurt my soul the most during this time has been the silence of who I thought were my friends. So when Black Lives Matter and George Floyd was killed by a white police officer, this synagogue and many of its members marched proudly, and we proclaimed, as I did from this bema, Black Lives Matter, because I thought that there is systemic racism against black people in this country. When Asian hate rose because of COVID, and we have a very densely saturated population of Asian Americans living in Bergen County, we came out in droves proudly. And then when Hamas attacked Jews in Israel on October the 7th, it was crickets. And it has hurt our soul, and it has caused us to recalibrate. One of the things that I said was, I will never stop marching against injustice for blacks or Asian hate or any other group, but I'm sad for those I walk next to because clearly our compasses aren't coordinated and calibrated the same way. Does that categorize as anti-Semitism, Jonathan, or is that really the result of people not being able to put their hands around white, affluent, privileged people who claim to be other?
So I think that's a great question. I think it's a complicated question. But first of all, I would say to the rabbi and to all of you, if you feel like people aren't responding, you're not alone. In fact, you're right. My phone didn't exactly ring off the hook. Now, I'll say a few things. There is absolutely systemic racism in this country. And yet I think the Black Lives Matter movement, with capital letters, is a moral fraud. A moral fraud. Empty of credibility. Why? Because of the slander that they've directed toward the state of Israel, let alone their own ridiculous policies. So, will I march for African American rights? Absolutely. Would I ever march with Black Lives Matter? Forget it. Nor should any of you. Would I stand up against Asian American hate? You better believe it. The ADL incubated the Asian American Foundation 3 years ago when Asians were being targeted, during the whole COVID craziness, when the president was saying all these disgusting things. You better believe we stood with them, and I still will. But has it been painful to me that some of the leaders in the community haven't stood with us? Absolutely. But look, I think we do what's right because it's right, not because we expect a quid pro quo. So I really applaud what the rabbi just said. We should march, we should stand, we should be with others. Again, guys, we're 2% of the population. Do the math. But it's not just an arithmetic problem, it's a moral question. Our own tradition compels us. Right, justice, you shall pursue. So we have to do that. Now that being said, we have to pick and choose our friends carefully. Interestingly enough, the first call that I got on October the 7th, ready for this, and I'm not a New Yorker, but the first call I got on October 7th was from Reverend Al Sharpton, who said, "What can I do?" Within 24 hours, Reverend Al organized Martin Luther King III, the NAACP, the Urban League, and they released a statement on the morning of October the 7th in support of our community.
Beautiful.
And the second call that I got on October the 7th was from the founder of the Asian American, or the CEO of the Asian American Foundation, who said, "What can I do?" And the level of alignment and allyship there has been amazing. So it's not all crickets, but it has not been nearly what I would have hoped for. Not nearly what I would have hoped for. The last thing I'll just say, as hard as this is for me sitting up here, keep in mind that there are people in our community, Jews, guys, who are Asian American. There are Jews, folks, who are biracial or African American. So if you think it's hard for you who identify as white or Ashkenazi or Sephardi, it is much harder for those of us in our own multiracial, multi-ethnic community who are Jews of color. So I just want to say that, Rabbi, because we should recognize that we have allies right within our own community who are here hurting with us, suffering with us, and we need to be there for them as well.
Let me ask you this question, Jonathan. This has been, this is the penultimate question that leads into the last question for the day, and they tie together. We at our synagogue work in nuance. We try and thread needles where and when we can. And this synagogue is unapologetically Zionist. I told you a few minutes ago I was blessed to be the rabbi here. I succeeded other rabbis, but before that was Arthur Hertzberg, who was one of the leading Zionists of all of Israel's history, an amazing person, and it's a great kavod for me to be the rabbi in the shul where Arthur was the president, was the rabbi. And we are unapologetically Zionist. We lead a mission to Israel at least once a year. We bring in Israeli speakers. We have no worry on that. What I worry about is how anti-Zionism has turned into anti-Semitism. And I think that that's been an uppercut right hook that we've had trouble dodging. I'm not anti-Semitic, I am anti-Zionist. I'm not saying I'm against Jews, I'm against Bibi Netanyahu, or I'm against occupation. And that needle has been very hard for most people to thread in response. I firmly believe, I've preached on this many times, that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. We are a people, we are a land, we are a culture, we are a religion. But could you help us with that definition? Because I think it is stymieing many, many people, and at times it even stymies me.
So, the rabbi is right, first and foremost. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, period, full stop. Zionism is the idea that Jews have the right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. Anti-Zionism is the ideology that says Jews don't have rights. Jews don't have that basic right that all other people should have. Zionism is an ideology not of exclusion, but inclusion. Jews from all, again, ethnicities and races. And by the way, Zionism doesn't say that there's no room for Palestinians, doesn't say there's no room for Bedouins, doesn't say there's no room for Christians or Muslims or Druze or Baha'i, doesn't say there's no room for gays or anyone else. Zionism is the ideology of creation, that the Jews have the right to self-determination. Anti-Zionism is the ideology that it's an ideology of destruction, that Jews don't have the same rights. By the way, doesn't matter who's saying it. Doesn't matter if the person saying it is a Jew. Because let's acknowledge there are Jews in our own midst who are anti-Zionist. Look, being black doesn't exempt you from being racist. Being an immigrant doesn't necessarily exempt you from being xenophobic. And being Jewish doesn't exempt you from being anti-Semitic. You might not intend it, and let's be clear, I think a lot of these kids on our campuses, Rabbi, are not trying to be anti-Semitic, but when they are peddling ideas that come from the Soviet Union, when they are embracing an ideology of nihilism, it is anti-Semitism. But when they say, look, I'm not opposed to Jews, I'm not opposed to that, I'm just an anti-Zionist, that's kind of like saying in 1963, I'm against racism, but I don't believe in the civil rights movement. Think about that. When they say they're anti-Zionist, but not anti-Semitic, it's like saying, well, I'm not a racist. I just don't believe in civil equality for black people. I'm sorry, you're a racist. You might not realize that. You might not be in touch with your inner feelings, but if you think that African Americans don't deserve civil rights, you're a racist. And if you think that Jews don't deserve the same rights as everyone else should have, you're an anti-Semite. Or at best, you're peddling anti-Semitic ideas. Now, in fairness, I don't think the organized Jewish community, Exhibit A is sitting right here, me, have done a good enough job of explaining, of clarifying for the world why this is so dangerous. We need to do a better job so that when Austin and his sister go to college, they are armed and prepared. And they can explain why this is so deadly. One last thing. If you're wondering where did Zionism start, we mentioned Herzl, or the rabbi mentioned Herzl a few minutes ago. It didn't start in 1897 with the first Congress. Zionism starts right there. Zionism started thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years ago. Zionism is essential. It is inextricable from your faith. It's on every page of the Siddur. The calls to Zion, the name of Israel, the calls to our peoplehood. So these anti-Zionists, they are not just against the political state of Israel. Anti-Zionism is an ideology that seeks to negate us as Jews. And that's why it's so evil and so wrong. And God willing, ADL and others will do a better job of explaining that. And again, arming your kids and all of you with the rhetoric you need to make the case in the court of public opinion.
I love that piece on the Torah. That was brilliant. I'm going to end with the easiest question of all, John.
I love you, too.
Yeah. When Robin was introducing you, she talked about how you worked at UCLA and at Penn, and I thought, well, ADL's an easy job compared to those two places. I want to talk to you about the college campus, which clearly was just tinder that just exploded. And that's why I asked the question about anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. I see people here like the president of our federation, Dan Schluffman, who was a hero in taking on the leadership of Cornell. I see people here who have been leaders and donors to Penn. I see people here who are involved and engaged at Harvard, who have been treading water at best. And like you said, also not a fan of cancel culture, but I've been proud to see the market pressure of withdrawing money from some of these places, and hopefully it will have an effect. It's a two-part question, and perhaps it's totally unfair, but A, how the hell did we get here on these college campuses to get like this so quickly? And B, equally important, how do we turn this battleship around in a canal? How do we take the reality of college campuses today and make it into something that is a safer place for Jews? Just a couple weeks ago, I was celebrating the bar mitzvah of somebody who has a senior in high school, and they said, look, my kid can get into almost any Ivy. I don't want him going there. I will not send my kid to particular schools. And I thought to myself, wow, look what it's come to, that we no longer are denied acceptance to Harvard, but we're choosing not to send our kid there. We'd rather send them to Georgetown, a Jesuit school, because of the way he'd be treated as a Jew.
So I'm the father of two young men who are in college. So I sophomore and a freshman. So I can totally relate to this whole issue as a dad, let alone as a CEO of ADL. And wherever I go, whenever I travel, and I talk to Jews, and I talk to Jewish families, and I talk to Jewish donors, this issue of college campuses is the most painful. I think it was Lenin who said, there are decades when nothing happens, and then there are days when decades happen. And I think it's true. I think the issue on our college campuses didn't happen overnight. It's been building like over 30 years. Really, or maybe 23 years since the failure of the Second Intifada, when the Palestinian movement, as you will, decided they were going to focus on delegitimizing Israel, destroying it that way rather than trying to destroy it militarily, because they knew they would fail. Look, I don't think any of this is an accident. I think there has been a determine, and by the way, I mean, I run the ADL, like I'm sort of not a conspiracy theorist. Conspiracies are contrivances, are made up things. They're not real, right? The Democratic Party isn't sucking the blood of children in a pizza parlor in DC, as they said, right? COVID-19 wasn't cooked up by the Israelis as a bioweapon. The earth is not flat, all right? Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. And yet, as it relates to this, follow the money. Number one, follow the money from Saudi and Qatar and all these places into these universities. And it might not necessarily be that the university leadership is anti-Semitic. It might even be that they're anti-Israel. But when they've got hundreds of millions of dollars on the line from Qatar, it sort of inhibits their ability to speak out against what they see as wrong. Just does. When Qatar and other countries and other donors are funding these chairs, these professorships, school's not so happy about calling them out. So number one, I think the influence of money has helped make this happen. Now you could say, well, there's also Jewish money in these places too. That's certainly true, absolutely. But I think the Gulf money is part of it. I think secondly, I'm just gonna lay it out there. There are certain actors on campus, like one group in particular, and I actually don't wanna besmirch the Shabbat by mentioning their name. I'm not gonna do that, because this is a holy day. But there are certain actors on campus who are taking their direction from the terrorists in Gaza and their handlers in Iran, which is why the ADL sent a letter to 200 university presidents 3 weeks ago and said, investigate this group for providing material support to a foreign terror organization. And I am going to hold every one of these university presidents accountable. We've already gotten this group banned at Brandeis, suspended at Columbia, suspended at GW, and more suspensions are coming. But let's also be honest, like Hillel, and by the way, ADL works very closely with Hillel. I love Hillel International. My wife was on the board of the UCLA Hillel. We're proud supporters of Hillel at the university my oldest one goes to. But like Hillel, they can barely organize a Havdalah service, let alone do hand-to-hand combat with these anti-Israel forces. It's the truth. So we need to do a better job of preparing and arming them for this fight. So again, I think bad actors with bad intentions combined with money, directed intentional money, and then finally, again, the money's not going to Kansas State University. It's going to Harvard. It's going to Cornell. It's going to Northwestern. It's going to Tufts. It's going to these places that are influential. Not an accident. And then take those two things, okay, against the backdrop of normalizing anti-Semitism. But finally, to the question that was raised about where do I send my kid? Guys, this is my view. It might not be shared by all of you. But we as Jews have been very, very blessed and comfortable in this country in ways that my grandfather wasn't, in ways that my father-in-law wasn't. But we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You think it's hard for your kid to be at Michigan? Right? Try being again at the University of Tehran in 1979. Try being at the Heidelberg in 1935. What do I mean by that? Guys, I am not willing, and none of you should be willing to cede Harvard University to the haters. I'm not willing to give up Penn to the anti-Semites. I'm not willing to literally abandon our Ivy League institutions to the anti-Zionists. You can forget it. That stops here. That stops now. So God bless that individual. That dad should send his kid to the best school he can get into. And that kid should go to school ready to learn and ready to roll up his sleeves and fight for our people. Now, again, I get that you want to send your kid to school to have a good time and go to fraternity parties and get a good degree and get a good job. But guys, we're Jewish. We're Jews. We have obligations. We have mitzvot we need to fulfill. And we have literally, you heard about it today, you read it, we talked about it, it's in the Parsha. It's in the Parsha. We have the covenant that was given to Abraham that was passed on to Jacob. Like, we have a covenantal responsibility here. And it's up to us. It's up to us. We are the front line. You are the front line. So we've got to be ready to fight. Now, I'll say one last thing. I don't take this for granted, and I am not putting it all on our kids. Last week, not this past Monday, but the prior Monday, ADL launched, it's called the Campus Anti-Semitism Legal Line. It's an 800 number, it's called CALL, C-A-L-L, to allow students at University of Michigan or at any other institution, if you've experienced discrimination or hate, to call us so we can explore your legal options. Remember, these schools have a legal obligation under the Civil Rights Act, it's called Title VI, to make sure our Jewish kids don't face discrimination, just like black kids, just like LGBTQ kids. And so, these universities have been pathetic in enforcing it, but I am going to make them. So we launched this. We launched this line in partnership with Hillel and a group called Brandeis Center, and we brought in Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher. We've now trained over 100 lawyers, like 115 lawyers, and we're going to get to 1,000 to be prepared to take on Title VI cases. And literally, Rabbi, in 2 weeks, we have over 250 cases.
Wow.
Kids who have said, this is what happened to me. So look, even if of 250, only 20% shake out, I want you to imagine the ADL, and by the way, I'm not going to bring all these cases myself. That's why I'm training 1,000 lawyers. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, they say. But we will, again, if I can't use moral suasion, like making the case, and market pressures fail, like pulling our money, then we will use the law to hold these schools accountable once and for all. And this is where I'll end. My wife and I were so heartened when we walked into this sanctuary and saw this flag on the bima. And for me, this flag isn't just the flag of the political nation state of Israel, although it is. It's the symbol of our people. And I think all the time, and I know we will win. I know we will win. We will win in Gaza. We will win in the Middle East. And we will win here because I believe in my heart. I believe in my neshama. I believe in my deepest parts of my being in one thought, which is Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael.
I'm going to ask your indulgence for a moment and do something I don't usually conclude with, Jonathan, and that is I want to give you a bracha. I want to bless you that God should continue to look after you, keep you healthy and strong, because this is just the first minutes of the first quarter of what will be a long game. But I believe you're 100% right. We are going to win, and I think one of the main reasons we're going to win is because we have you as quarterback and coach. And I am so appreciative of your leadership on behalf of all of us. And I just pray that God continue to keep you healthy and strong and continue leading us to that victory because we need it. May God bless you and keep you. And thank you for the honor of being here today.